Until a couple of years ago, if you found yourself traveling to Panama City, the capital of the Central American nation of Panama, you could, if you were so inclined, check into the Trump International Hotel and Tower, a 70-story building built to resemble a billowing sail and containing the hotel managed by the Trump Organization. But after Donald Trump became president, the owners of that hotel began trying to fire the Trump Organization from running the hotel because they said the Trump Organization had so mismanaged the hotel and the Trump brand was so toxic, the hotel was being run into the ground. Ultimately, though, in March of 2018, the Trump Organization was evicted from the property. A Panamanian judge sided with the hotel's owner, and the police were sent in one last time to oust the Trump management. And once the Trump management was gone, it was time to deal with the Trump sign. The Trump name was pried off of Donald Trump's only hotel in Latin America, literally. Removed unceremoniously, letter by letter. And given what we know of Donald Trump, one has to assume this was the most painful part of all. Goodness knows he really likes to put his name on things. But this sort of thing's been happening over and over, property by property, ever since Donald Trump was elected president. His name was taken off his hotel in my hometown, Toronto. It was also taken off his hotel in New York's Soho neighborhood. The Trump name is gone from a luxury hotel project in Brazil. The tenants of at least 6 apartment buildings in New York City voted to remove his name from their facades, and more are expected to do so soon. Officials in New York, Chicago, and Vancouver are all in the process of trying to get Trump's name removed from various properties in those cities, in particular because they say they have a civic interest in not having the name of a man who fomented an insurrection against the United States plastered across their skylines in giant letters. In other words, the Trump brand is already a brand in crisis. It has been for years. Seems like maybe the Trump Organization as a business and a brand might not be in a position to withstand a 10-count felony indictment plus 15 felony counts against its chief financial officer. Bloomberg notes that, quote, when financiers see the charges, their thoughts may turn to the company's ability to refinance more than $590 million of debt coming due within the next 4 years, more than half of which Trump personally guaranteed. Because as one former prosecutor points out, the direct consequences of any criminal conviction could be a massive fine, probation, or some type of court supervision. And as we know, Donald Trump has already alienated almost every bank on earth that could conceivably loan him money. The Washington Post's David Fahrenthold, who has done some of the deepest, most granular reporting over the last few years on Donald Trump's businesses, including, I should say, on that amazing Panama City story. Well, today, David Fahrenthold and his colleagues, Jonathan O'Connell and Josh Dawsey, spoke with a couple of Trump's biographers to try to put these latest charges in perspective. Both of them said the indictment of the Trump Organization comes during what appears to be the company's most difficult moment since Trump's financial crash in the early 1990s. Quote, during that period, Trump found himself hundreds of millions of dollars in debt, and he lost control of prized assets, including an airline, a yacht, and New York's Plaza Hotel. His business empire did not fully recover for a decade until Trump gained television fame and made tens of millions as the star of NBC's The Apprentice. Well, needless to say, Trump seems unlikely to be saved by a lucrative new network television contract anytime soon. But another thing to keep in mind in terms of the health of the Trump Organization is the charges filed against the CFO, Alan Weisselberg, not just because of his personal legal liability or the pressure on him to turn on his boss, but because of what it could mean for the company if anything happens to him. One Trump biographer tells David Fahrenthold that, quote, if Weisselberg were to unexpectedly leave the company, whether for reasons related to the case or not, it could cause a major disruption. Weisselberg has effectively run the business with Trump for several decades, managing the details and the finances while Trump has built his brand and cut deals. The Trump Organization is a web of hundreds of interrelated limited liability companies, making it unusually difficult to run for a relatively small company. Quote, it was Weisselberg's job to keep everything straight. Well, joining us now is that reporter, the Washington Post's David Fahrenthold. He was the first to report on the existence of the special grand jury in this case back in May. This week, he was the first to report that the grand jury had filed criminal indictments against the Trump Organization and against its chief financial officers. So, David, thanks for your time tonight. I know you've been busy. Give us a sense of what the financial situation is right now for the Trump Organization. What do we know about how much of a going concern this business actually is?
Well, obviously, it's a private company. It doesn't put out public statements about its cash flow. But here's what we do know. It's shrunk, as you said. It's lost a lot of hotels. It's lost one of its biggest cash generators, which was the merchandising business. Think about all the Trump suits, Trump eyeglasses, Trump water, Trump the fragrance, all this stuff that generated money for Trump for nothing, for no work and no effort. Just other people paid him to put his name on their stuff. That's gone. In addition to the hotels that suffered and the hotels that are gone, COVID took a big bite out of his properties by ending the tourism business from almost all of 2020. So his business was in dire shape at the beginning of 2021. Then came the January 6th insurrection and Trump's role in it, which drove away more lenders, more business partners, a PGA Tour event, the British Open. And now on top of all of that, we have this indictment, which, they haven't been convicted of anything yet, but it adds legal costs and uncertainty at a time when the business, as you said, is already at one of its lowest ebbs since 1990.
I think about companies that are convicted. It's not something that happens very much. We remember Arthur Andersen, back in the early 2000s, that was ultimately overturned, but it wrecked the business. But that's a different kind of business. That was an accounting business. It had clients who said, we don't want to be associated with it. Is the Trump Organization that kind of business, or does it run on its own?
I don't think it would be as devastating. Obviously, Arthur Andersen was an auditing business. You can't audit people if you've been convicted of a felony. It's hard to have government contracts. The Trump Organization it's not really that much of a regulated business. It doesn't need many licenses to operate that it might lose if it's convicted. There might have trouble with its lenders. There might be trouble with liquor licenses, which are really crucial to making money off its hotels and golf clubs. I don't think that a conviction would be an automatic death sentence for it the way that it was for Arthur Andersen. That said, it adds stigma on top of stigma and might make it even harder for this company to, as you said, refinance its loans, find other business partners, move on from the hole that it's in.
There's stuff that was alleged is alleged to be illegal. At best, it's unsavory. It may be more common than we think. People have brought that up, that the kind of things, the expensing of the unorthodox business practices that the Trump Organization allegedly practiced. You've seen these before. You've reported on this company in the past. Did these charges surprise you?
They didn't surprise me, only in that there seemed to be such a deliberate effort to deceive here. I covered the Trump Foundation a few years ago, this little charity Trump ran, and that ran afoul of all kinds of different laws. And they blamed we just didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how to run a charity. We didn't bother to learn. And we made these mistakes through sloppiness. This thing, on the other hand, seems to be deceit done purposefully. If you recall, the indictment says there was a second set of books the Trump Organization created where they kept track of the real compensation for their employees. And then they showed the IRS and state tax authorities another set of books in which some of that compensation was hidden. People that I've talked to that know this world say that's manna from heaven for a tax fraud prosecutor, in that both you're showing that you understood that what you're doing is wrong because you're keeping a ledger that hides things from the government, and also you kept track of exactly how much you hid from the government. This isn't something where they have to go back and recreate how much money was given out. You have a record. The Trump Organization has a record of the cash that they should have paid taxes on, and they didn't.
Let's talk about the loans. This company owes money. Donald Trump owes money. This has been a major concern of his for some time. He's always been able to not only refinance, but this guy gets better terms than folks who have no strikes against them. What happens now? How serious is it that he's got more than $500 million of loans that are coming up?
It was a serious situation, and it was serious before this indictment. It's serious now. The bigger problem for him is not the indictment, but rather the nature of the properties on which he has these loans. A couple of them, his Doral property down in Florida, his D.C. hotel, they don't make money. They don't make enough money to pay off the huge loans. And the D.C. hotel, that was clear at the beginning when he got this giant loan that he was never going to make enough money to pay it back. And that was before he destroyed his brand with politics. So all along, I think people have thought, OK, Trump needs to refinance these loans. He's never going to be able to pay them off. Again, looking from outside, we don't know what his balance sheet says. That's going to be harder to find somebody to refinance it. That said, Trump's entire life has been a sort of an object lesson on the idea that there's a sucker born every minute, and if he just tries hard enough, there'll be somebody who will save him. So I think it's way too early to say he can't get out of this mess. He's always found a way out before, but certainly his options have narrowed.
He always has found a way out before. Interesting to follow the story with you. Washington Post reporter David Fahrenthold. Always good to see you, my friend. Thank you.